Good morning, everyone. How are you? Good. I am so delighted to be here with you today, and I'm having kind of a perfect storm of wonderful happening. And that is, first of all, that I get to be here with you, and also to support the ministries of Reverend Sandy and Kirk. I've known them and loved them for a very, very long time, and so it's very precious to support anything that they're doing. I also feel happy to be with Reverend Bobby and Reverend Bill, and soon to be Reverend John and Reverend Pam, who are also walking through, did I say John? Yes, John. John, are you here? Where are you? There you are. They are walking the path of ministry as well, and so it's just lovely. How blessed is my life that I get to be with these most amazing people and to support them along their goal to be fully expressed ministers. It's wonderful. And also another good thing is that I'm appreciating through your adventures in spirit that you are a community growing in consciousness together. And I did have my own community for 10 years in San Diego. And people ask me if I miss having a center. And what I always miss is being with a group that is growing in consciousness together. So I'm very happy to touch into that experience today. And then the final little bit of wonderful is that Dr. Roger actually sent me a signed copy of his book that I never had the chance to read. And so now I have had the chance to look in at least at this chapter that we're doing here. So this book is an excellent one. It's called This Life is Joy. And Michael Beckwith has written a preface to the book that also caught my attention. And he said this book is an invitation to remember that the self is always telling you what it has always known about you. And I would say that what the self has always known about us is that we're whole, happy, and free. And this self guides us and escorts us into both the luminous and the dark places of life, where we are guided to walk a journey of awakening awareness. And Michael goes on to say that any human aberration there is, I thought that was an interesting word choice, aberration. In other words, any conflict, difficulty, or glitch that's of the human variety really has inside of it a spiritual aspiration that is calling us forward and that is calling us to open into new realizations. And the last line really got me. He said, so that we may know we're ever so much greater than the darkness that we carry inside. We're ever so much greater than the darkness that we carry inside, and we all have a little bit of that. And so with that in mind, I want to invite you wholeheartedly into this week's focus on conflict and forgiveness, particularly if everything in you is saying run really fast away. Conflict and forgiveness, and to actually get the best, get the most out of this week. And if forgiveness has been if you're conflict avoidant, and if forgiveness has been a difficult topic for you, I just encourage you to be willing to take the tiniest step in the direction of your healing. Just the tiniest little step to open up a little bit of willingness to complete something from the past so that you can be free, So the book starts with, or the chapter starts with great quotations. We already heard the Thomas Crum one, and I'm going to read it again because it's really what the chapter is about and what my talk is about too. Our lives are not dependent on whether or not we have conflict. It is what we do with the conflict that makes all the difference. There is conflict in life, I've noticed, at least in mine, and it's what we do with it. And then the second quotation is also good, from Emmett Fox. As long as you are not forgiving, you are connected by a hook stronger than steel. I know, I expected a more audible response. Oh, like that. As long as we're not forgiving, we are connected with a hook that is stronger than steel. And I think we practice non-forgiveness sometimes as a way to keep people away, to keep them out of our heart. And yet it is the non-forgiveness is the exact thing that keeps us tethered to them. And so one of the best things you can do to set yourself free from somebody that you don't want to be involved with anymore is to forgive them, and we'll explore that in a little bit. One thing I like about this book is that Dr. Roger addresses conflict and forgiveness at the same time. And I think we often address them separately. We talk about the conflicts in our life, and then we talk about the need for forgiveness. And he's actually bridged the two, or what we try to do, I think, is leap into forgiveness before we've even understood the conflict or actually seen the value of conflict. And that's a point that I would really like to get across today, is the value that exists in conflict. The two play a role together. The two play a role together. And they play a role in the advancement of our learning and our awakening. And so Dr. Roger is a fine writer, a really excellent writer, and he packs so much realization into one sentence that it takes a while to read, and also, as Michael Beckwith suggests, so do I, it's important to reread what it is he is saying, and you will, because he's really thought it through, and every single word counts. I always admire a writer like that. And what I'd like to add to what he shares is a really big picture take on the subject of conflict and forgiveness, and I think it goes along very nicely with what he presents in this chapter. So from a big picture point of view, we can look at who we are on the spiritual journey, and then the role that our relationships play in our life and in our awakening. And so Ernest Holmes, I'm paraphrasing, has a beautiful teaching, and he says that we are souls on a pathway of discovery. That just hooked me right away when I was a brand new student in Science of Mind. We are souls on a pathway of discovery. And the work of this journey is, first of all, to allow more and more of the divine nature to be revealed in us. In other words, every single thing that we are going through is an incredible opportunity to release the small self version of who we are and to allow more of the divine truth to come in. So that really every day we're becoming more love, and we're becoming more peace, and we're becoming more joy and more freedom and more of all, and more abundance and all of the other qualities. And I think that this is a really gift-filled teaching of Science of Mind, that that's what our path is. But he says not only that, it's that at the same time we're spiraling up to greater and greater awareness that God is what we are. So we're walking this path to allow more of the divine nature to be revealed in us, and at the same time we're spiraling up to the greater awareness that God is what we are. That's what we teach, that the infinite thing that we call God, Spirit, Life, whatever your word is, has become that which we each are. You know, and if we just could get that, we wouldn't be here, right? We wouldn't be needing to sit here and learn this, except then, no, we would, because then we'd be celebrating together. So that's the first thing. Our spiritual journey is about coming to know who we are and expressing it. The second thing, which is more about relationships, I'll offer to you in the form of a little prayer by the Middle Eastern poet Hafiz, and it's called, "If God Invited You to a Party." If God invited you to a party and said, "Everyone in the ballroom tonight will be my special guest," how would you then treat them when you arrived? Indeed, indeed, Hafiz knows there is no one in this world who is not upon his jeweled dance floor. If God invited you to a party and said, "Everyone in the ballroom tonight will be my special guest," how then would you treat them when you arrived? Indeed, indeed, Hafiz knows there is no one in this world who is not upon his jeweled dance floor. So what does that mean? It means we are all here together. It means we have been invited into life on the planet at this time for exactly the way that it is, and exactly all of the opportunities that there are. And we are all invited guests on the dance floor at the same time, and we are here to dance with each other. And that this truth, that we're all the invited guests, is true of you, it's true of me, it's true of all of the members of this community, it's true of all the people that you know and love and admire, it's true of all the people that you don't know, you don't love, and you don't admire, it's true of our presidential candidates, it's true of the ISIS fighters. Those are the two groups I'm doing major learning with, candidates, fighters. It's true of everybody in existence at this time. We have been invited to the dance floor of life. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's some people that we really like to dance with. We like the way they dance, we like them, and we want to dance with them, and we have a pretty good time. And there are other people where we don't like how they dance, and if we try to dance with them, there's lots of toes stepping on. And yet the truth is we are all in this together, and how is it that we can honor that basic truth? How is it that we can honor, in fact, that basic truth? And what I would offer to you is that there is no mistake, that we are all here on this planet at this time for exactly the awakening that is taking place, and every single thing counts. There is nothing wasted, and there is nothing missing in the experience. And so I want to offer you this idea that everything in your life, in your personal life, in our collective life, is grist for the mill of awakening. Do you know that idiom? The grist for a flour mill was a little bit of gravel that was thrown on the mill to help with the grinding of the wheat. So everything in your life I offer to you to consider is grist for the mill of your awakening, or if you don't like that idea, you can call it jet fuel for your evolution. Every single thing, jet fuel for your evolution. Parents, life, I almost said past life, well that too. Parents, early history, growing up years, everything about it, everything that has taken place in your life has brought you to this very moment right now. And so what this means is that conflict has its place in our awakening process. As much as we don't like it, it has its role to play. And I think of conflict as the friction that wakes us up, if we will use it that way. And the waking up is all about moving beyond using conflict as a way to blame somebody else and actually turning the attention to ourselves to consider what's going on, so that we have what's going on with us, that we're having this response to this person that we call conflict. It's about using conflict, again, not to project blame on the other, but to have a deeper inquiry into yourself, into what limited place you're living from, into the false belief that you have about yourself, into the woundedness that you're still carrying around. It's a way to inquire within about what is it in me that is having me want to separate and divide and argue with this person and ultimately throw them out of my heart. And that is one of the great values of conflict, is that we start that particular inquiry. And it's the separating and dividing that we do that is so painful. One of the first principles I learned coming into Science of Mind was that there is only one problem, and it's separation. And there's only one solution, and it's unity. And if you look at anything that is a problem for you or anybody you love or any condition in the world, what it has at the basis of it is the belief in separation. And so it's an ongoing question for us: are we going to be part of the problem or part of the solution? And so often the way in which we deal with conflict perpetuates the problem of separation. So many years ago, before I came into our teaching, I was reading the works of G.I. Gurdjieff. Anybody know Gurdjieff out there? Kind of a wild, wonderful man, and not only were his teachings great, but the stories about him were also pretty interesting. And he had an intentional community. And the story is that there was a man who was in that intentional community that created an enormous amount of conflict with everybody else in the community. He was difficult, he was not nice, there was just conflict everywhere. Nobody liked him, and one day he left. Finally, he got vibed out. Of course, this never happens in spiritual community, right? He got vibed out, and Gurdjieff actually sent somebody to fetch him and bring him back, saying that the friction that this man caused was so much more important for awareness and awakening within each individual than the peace of his absence would bring. Interesting. I've thought about that forever. It's very interesting, isn't it? Very, very interesting idea. I'm glad you like that. That makes two of us. That's great. The tendency for us when conflict arises, this is something Dr. Rogers says, is that we want to squelch it or deny it. Or the words I use are evade, avoid, withdraw. I do lots of consulting in our communities, and the strategy of choice, the most predominant strategy when stress happens in our organization, is people withdraw. And they either withdraw physically, but if they're leaders, they can't withdraw physically, they withdraw within themselves. But what they also do is project blame. So it's take a breath, because this gets dark in here a little bit. And that is the problem for us with conflict. Instead of standing present and saying, what can I learn about myself in this? We begin to turn judgment and make wrong against the other people in our life. We make someone else the problem. And the problem with making someone else outside of us the problem is it makes us a victim. And we don't get to progress and hold on to victimhood. You cannot be in victimhood and progress along the path. It just does not work. There's a body of teaching that I do. Our ministers and ministerial students know this. It's the work of Marcia Sutton and Lloyd Strom, and one of their pieces of teaching is the phrase, temptations come from our neighbors. And neighbors is a word that Emma Curtis Hopkins uses a lot. Your neighbor is anybody who's in life with you. So you are all neighbors to each other in this community. It's not just the people who live next door to you. And all the people in your life are your neighbors. And actually that word neighbor comes out of the one commandment that came out of the 10. You know, the 10 commandments became the one commandment. Love the Lord, love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. There's that word. Just as a little aside, we're not quite sure what that phrase means. Does it mean love your neighbor as you love yourself? If that's the case, then our neighbor is in trouble generally, right? Because we don't all love ourselves so well. But really it means love your neighbor as if he were yourself, as if she were yourself, because he is and she is. Because at the foundation of it all, we are one. But what happens is we get tempted. The people in our life tempt us to not love them. They do something that we don't like, or they don't do what we want them to do, and we get tempted to not love them. But the issue is, it's not really about them. It's how we're seeing them. It's how we see people in our life that tempts us to not love them. We fall out of seeing the wholeness and the truth and the beauty in them, and we start seeing them in terms of what we don't like about their behavior. And by the way, this is not about denial. We see what we see and we know what we know. But chances are, when you are really aggravated by somebody, that person's behavior is pressing into something that goes farther back in your life experience than that particular moment. I need to just rest a minute. We are the ones who assign the meaning that we give to someone else's behavior. And usually the source of that assigning of meaning comes way back in the past. And one of the cruelest things we do is that we reduce people to just being in our minds how we're assessing them in that moment. We actually reduce the multifaceted diamond beingness of the people in our life down to a couple of characteristics that we sum up and make wrong, and then we can hold them in that little box. Does this seem true to you? Okay. It's true for me. The diarist Ananias Nin said, we see things not as they are, but as we are. We see things not as they are, but as we are. And Dr. Rogers speaks to what I would call a rebound effect, that if we're really making someone, if we're in a conflict with somebody and we've fallen out of love with them and we're making them wrong because of what they've done, particularly if we feel hurt, what we're really saying is, I've been diminished in some way. And guess what? That is not the spiritual truth. Because who you are is a whole, complete, free, unconditioned, unlimited being that cannot be diminished by what anyone else has done, except as you allow yourself to feel that way. And so these are the things that we can use conflict to wake up to. The wake-up moment in conflict comes when we shift from saying, how could he or she do that to me, and what's wrong with them, to what's going on with me that I'm having this experience of this person. What's going on with me that I am so agitated? What is it that I'm believing? How am I assessing this behavior, and what is it making it mean to me? There's a fellow who's in my church in San Diego, Chad Edwards, who's gone on to other dimensions. He and I worked very closely together, very strong personality, and I have my fixed moments as well. And he would say to me, I may have pushed your button, but I didn't install it. And if you remember nothing else, remember that. Of course, you're going to be loving to use that with somebody, but just remember it goes the other way too. And that was an aha for me. I had a revelation in that moment. In other words, he was saying, I realized that I leaned into a sensitivity of yours. We don't have to deny that. But the wires to that go far back into my past. And we will find that the things that are our greatest sensitivities were formed a long time ago, usually when we were very, very young. And with a child's mind, well, we had an experience with a child's mind. We came to a belief about ourselves or about life, and it lives as this unconscious false belief way deep in the subjective, and it will outpicture. And the people in our life just lean into those buttons. But the healing comes when we say, let me inquire about where this reaction that I'm having began. This is the value of conflict, that you use it for your own awakening, that you stop the make wrong and go within and look to see what in you from the past needs to be healed. And you know, something miraculous happens when we do that, when we ask that question, what's going on with me that I'm having this experience of this person? That suddenly we can see that things began a long time ago that we can do the work on. But we also begin to see that present moment conflict is an invitation to heal those things of the past. And when that comes into our awareness, we can actually do the work and come into a greater experience of freedom and come to have a greater sense of the unfolding nature of our own life. And I will tell you, years ago, in the hardest moments of my life, my spiritual counselor said to me, it took this to get you to do the healing you needed to do. And she was right. It was only that particular combination of person and situation that could throw me enough to my knees, truly, that I would do the work to understand how that was reflective of something from the past. And so I stand before you today so much more healed and whole because of that. And the truth is, it's the truth for you. When we understand the value of conflict and can work with it, a whole world of freedom opens up for us, a whole world of freedom. Because we can begin to see that there's so much more taking place in our life than the surface story. The surface story is just the tip of the iceberg. And when we begin to see at this deeper level, we can also begin to see the through line of our life. And what is the deep material your soul has been working on in this lifetime? The deep, deep through line. Because your soul is calling you. If we're souls on a pathway of discovery, our souls are moving along with the experiences of our life, using them for awakening and advancement, for learning and advancement. But it starts with knowing that life is not a surface event. It's really what's going on way underneath. And when we start to see that truth, we begin to experience the true richness and the unfoldment and the meaning of our life. It took every relationship that you've had, however it happened, to get you here today to be the glorious being that you are, which you are, right? The glorious being you are. So every single relationship contributes to that awakening, no matter how it was. And if we could actually open our eyes and see the gift that we have been given by the deepest and most difficult relationships, we would fall on our knees in gratitude and say, thank you for this learning, truly. And I just plant that idea with you, even though you may be very far from there at the moment, and that's okay. It takes a while to get there. But we all are on the dance floor in life. We're all dancing with each other and engaging in ways that the purpose of which is to wake us all up to the greater truth of who and what we are. So forgiveness, so that was the conflict part. And forgiveness, Dr. Rogers says, is how we clean up the residue from the awakening process. I like that phrase. It's how we clean up the residue from our awakening process. And I think of forgiveness as being the washing out of the false ideas, of the limited thought that I have about myself based on the past, of regrets and resentments, of the tendency to make somebody else wrong and project blame. Forgiveness is how we clean up the residue from the awakening process. And here's the point: if we do not do the work, we are stuck. If we don't do the work, we are stuck in the past. Part of us is stuck right back at that event. Wherever it was, whenever it was, we are stuck at that moment, in that limited version of who and what we are, and defining ourselves in terms of what happened. So here's some affirmations for you. Let's do these together. Please repeat after me. Who I am is greater than anything I've been through. Who I am is greater than any hurt I have experienced. We're going to say both of them 2 more times. Who I am is greater than anything I have been through. Who I am is greater than any hurt I have experienced. And one more time. Who I am is greater than anything I have been through. Who I am is greater than any hurt I have experienced. When I think of the energy of forgiveness, it feels old, of non-forgiveness, it feels old, cold, closed, constricted, victim-y, uninteresting, self-righteous. When I think of the energy of forgiveness, it feels open and spacious and compassionate and freeing and whole. It's just a question of which one will we choose. The Course in Miracles has this beautiful phrase: there is no spot on earth more sacred than where an ancient hatred has become a present love. There is no spot on earth more sacred than where an ancient hatred has become a present love. What forgiveness isn't, Dr. Rogers says, is forgetting, condoning, getting on our high horse, and I would add, or letting it happen again. That's important. That's what forgiveness isn't. What forgiveness is permission to move forward. In forgiveness, we give ourselves permission to move forward from the event. It is permission to not suffer the damage of something anymore and to stop defining ourselves in terms of that. Dr. Carol Huntley, who's a minister in our movement, says forgiveness is allowing someone harmless passage through your mind. I like that. Allowing someone harmless passage through your mind. Dr. Rogers says that forgiveness is channeling energy into something constructive, life-giving, and uplifting, and getting back to the higher agenda of your life. I think that is a winning thought there. That when we engage in forgiveness, we actually let ourselves get back to the higher agenda of our life. And so I'm going to invite you now into a little bit of time, guys, of forgiveness work. And chances are you have done a lot of forgiveness work in your life. And so if you're clear when you go into the meditation, and if you're clear and there's nothing there, then just meditate for a couple minutes. We'll be done fast. And for those of you who have done it before and there's still a little bit of resistance into completely doing that work, then I invite you just to take a step. Okay, you game? Just say yes. Okay, close your eyes. Thank you for listening so intently. I invite you to feel your feet on the floor and your body in the chair. Just to breathe into your physical beingness. And begin to feel your breath as it rises to the top of your inhale and falls to the bottom of your exhale. Allowing the inhale and the exhale to be one continuous cycle so that you're feeling the wheel of the breath. And the wheel of the breath is the wheel of life. And right at the center of the wheel is the heart of God. And so let that center merge with your own heart center as you direct your breath in and down into the deep place, the cave of the heart. So just breathe into the deep place in your heart and meet there what we call the indwelling presence. This is the self in you that sees with the eye of wisdom, that is also the eye of love. And I invite you just to silently ask this inner presence to guide you now. Just say, guide me now. And I invite you to consider what remains unforgiven. And let your inner self just bring up into your awareness any situation or person that remains unforgiven. Just allowing it to arise into awareness with no effort, no judgment. Just see what rises and breathe. And ask yourself, what am I holding on to? And what is the value of that? And what is the cost? And if there is a person who is associated with this bit of unforgiveness, I invite you to allow him or her to come to your awareness. And if it's yourself, then let it be so. Just imagining that being sitting across from you, and just take a moment to breathe and be. And in the moments of breathing and being, realize that both you and this person were called to the dance floor of life together for just the grand enactment that was necessary for the learning and advancement of both of your souls. And that in some way, not maybe fully known, it is exactly because of that event that you have become the awake, amazing being that you are. Feel within your heart what you have been called to learn and to know because of that event. And see if you can let the value of the learning be ever so much greater than the hurt of the event. And for the sake of forgiveness and for taking a step so that you may be free to give again, free to give in all areas of your life, I invite you to look into the eyes of this person and say, I love you. Speaking out loud now. I love you. I acknowledge you. I forgive you. I release you. We're going to do it 2 more times. I love you. I acknowledge you. I forgive you. I release you. I love you. I acknowledge you. I forgive you. I release you. I love you means I acknowledge our oneness. I acknowledge you means I honor that we were called to this experience out of the divine unfoldment of our lives in which everything counts. I forgive you means I give myself permission and I give you permission to move forward and to leave this past behind. And I release you means I release you, I set you free, and I set myself free to be the wholeness of who and what I am. Dr. Roger puts it this way. Forgiveness takes us into a larger, more expansive dimension of ourselves, where we realize that we are born of God and cannot be diminished by anything or anyone in the world. And there is no benefit to remain attached to pain, guilt, or a sense of unworthiness. In the higher dimension of being, we realize that there is really nothing to heal, only wholeness and magnificence to reveal. And in this higher dimension of being, we reunite with the wholeness and fullness of divine love. And so just allowing yourself to allow all the words that have said today, such beautiful things have been expressed. And Jill's words and song, and it's Jill, right? Yes, the words and Gretchen's songs and the prayer, Susan's prayer. Just knowing that the inner self knows exactly what to do with all that has been said and with all the work that needs to be done. So there's no effort or struggle. There's just allowing of the activity of spirit to move through us. As we walk this path, allowing more of the divine nature to be revealed in us and spiraling up to the awareness that God is what we are. And so I give thanks for this time together, for the activity of spirit. I so acknowledge this community for moving together in consciousness. And I accept that the light of our true being shines in the darkness, that we are lifted out of the past, that we rise whole and free, knowing there is nothing broken and nothing missing, and that we are ready to live a new life on a higher level of joy. And so I simply give thanks for this. I release this word. I know it is done. And together we say, and so it is.